Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. We're being rejoined with a guest that we had earlier on the program where he talked about how he left the corporate world at the age of 35 to embark on a trip known as El Camino de Santiago. It's a 500-mile pilgrimage that goes across Spain. And, many people try to attempt this journey and they realize that, there's a lot of inconveniences and things they're just not used to. Things just aren't at one's fingertips, but it's a wonderful way that somebody can discover the inside out of where they are and who they are and what they are in this world. He decided to go one more step further afterwards and decided to go on a bicycle, 9,000 miles to 9 European countries, Seattle to San Diego, and from Jasper, Alberta to Missoula, Montana. He's done pretty much all these trips solo, and he's here to talk with us about what this is all about. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program our guest, Koontz. Kurt, welcome back.
Daniel, thanks so much for having me back. It's an honor to be a repeat on your show.
Well, it's great to have somebody who's got a story such as this. Imagine you're out there on a bicycle by yourself in 9 European countries. How did all this start for you?
Oh, it was such a great time. I took up bicycling, and then I started to teach spin class at a local gym. And the reason I started to teach spin is I didn't like the music that other people played. So I thought, if I'm the teacher, at least I can control the music. And then I got the bicycling bug, and one day I was literally out mowing my yard, and my next-door neighbor goes to Europe a lot. And I stopped the mower, and I looked at him, and I said, Bob, I'm thinking about going to Amsterdam with a bicycle and just kind of trooping around for a while. What do you think of that? And he said, do you have the time? I said, yep. He said, do you have the money? I said, yep. He said, well, you should go. That afternoon, I went in and I booked an open-ended ticket to Amsterdam and spent 7 weeks over there on a bicycle without a map, and it was just an empowering trip.
Now, what made it empowering for you as you decided to do this?
Well, I would say, Daniel, the biggest thing about any of these trips is you're diving into the unknown. I mean, I remember one of the most frightening days of my life was arriving in Amsterdam. And what happened, I'm not very mechanically inclined. Every family has a fault. Ours, we are missing the mechanical gene. And my bike was taken apart by a local bicycle shop, and they put it into a box. And the pedals had to be reattached, the handlebars, the seat, and some other things. So I flew across to the water, and I ended up in Amsterdam, and at the baggage area, I had a bike and a box. That's all I had, and I had 2 little carry-on panniers. I had to undo that box, put the bicycle together, and I literally rode out the front door. And the point of all that is when you take a big journey like that and you purposely put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, that's where personal growth occurs. Mm-hmm. So by overcoming some of these obstacles, some of them that were not natural and some of them that I set up for myself, I just really, really grew as a person. And that's why I really enjoy these journeys.
Now, it's really nice. I remember, the drummer for Rush, Neil Peart. He used to like to go on long bike rides. In fact, it was said as they were approaching a place that they were going to play, that what he would do is he would actually get out about 100 miles out, and then he would bicycle in. And eventually it turned into a motorcycle trip, and he would just do these long rides, and I thought, that's an interesting way to creatively create music. You're just kind of out there with your thoughts, absorbing what's going on, and of course, you've seen the results as far as their albums go. With these things here, what kinds of creativity or experiences did you have when it came to being with your own thoughts out there in the world?
Yeah, well, first off, I've always been a fan of Rush, but after that story, I am a much bigger fan of Rush. Being out there on your own and facing all these obstacles, you really get a chance to go deep in your mind. I mean, A lot of times you have nobody else to talk to, which can be a little bit frightening. But you get out there and you're on your own and you overcome these obstacles and you meet people and you experience things. And the best thing to do is just to be in the moment. I remember on that European bike trip, I've always been a guy who's looking at the horizon. So this living in the moment is a newer thing to me at that time. I really had to tell myself on that trip, I just have to take every day one day at a time. I can't look 2 or 3 weeks down the road and say, life's going to be better when I get to France, or life's going to be better when I get to the Mediterranean, whatever it may be. You just have to realize each day there's going to be some joy, there's going to be some adversity, there's going to be some real high highs and potentially some real low lows. And learning to go with the flow is the way to be.
Yeah, it's just such an excellent journey, especially. Do you plan on putting this into a book for people?
I'm not sure. The bicycle trips were done a while ago, and I do have diaries from them. So at some point in time, I may write another book. The book I wrote about the Camino, that is something I just felt I had to write. That was such an incredible experience walking the 500 miles in Spain that I came home from that and said I have to write a book, and that's why I did it. These other ones, I may get the bug to write it, but it's been so long ago that I'm not sure I will.
No, I'm just curious, as you've done, of course, the Camino Trail, and then now have done this long bicycle journey, and I understand that coming up you're planning a 220-mile hike in Bhutan, is that people might look and go, well, this seems to be somebody who's searching for something, and then they might become curious themselves. You tend to tell them what the outcome was for you, and so therefore they seek. If you remember back in the day of San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury, everybody was, descending on that area there because of this great spiritual enlightenment that they thought they would experience, and what you ended up with was a bunch of drug-addicted, stoned hippies, I guess, and nobody really finding God or that spirit they thought they were going to find there. And but the fact is this is an individual journey, and it's one that you got to really decide, well, really the journey is the reward, isn't it?
Oh, Daniel, that was so well stated. I can't even begin to, I'm just affirmative in agreement. I get a lot of people that ask me about the Camino, and obviously it's a result of writing that book. And people are always saying, man, I'd like to do something like that. I'd like to go find myself. I'd like to have that experience. I go, you won't. It's all very unique. When I decided to do that book, I thought, well, there's 100 books out there already, so why should I do this? Then I said, well, wait a minute. No one ever saw this through my eyes. And that was just my experience. So I'm not saying that anybody's going to have a similar experience to the one I had. Mm-hmm. But I will say, as you just said, going on a journey is always rewarding because you're diving into the unknown. And that is where the good stuff, at least from my perspective, really happens.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the unknown, of course, with 9 countries in Europe, you're going to be dealing with things such as cultural as well as maybe some language challenges. How was that for you?
Oh, there's challenges every day. There's the cultural.
I have a tough time talking with most Americans this day and age. I think Europe would be a little more romantic.
The cultural challenges were very very difficult, and they were all different. I mean, you get comfortable and think you're kind of getting your groove on, and then you're in another country, and the groove is different, and you just have to learn to accommodate. The language barriers in the northern part of Europe, not much of an issue. Most everybody around Germany and Amsterdam and I guess Norway, Belgium, and those areas, not Norway, but Belgium, most people speak a lot of English, so it wasn't much of an issue. When I got into Italy and France, the verbal communication was much more difficult. But that's just another opportunity to expand. I mean, you can get a lot done through a stick drawing or just some nonverbal communication to really take things forward. So it's all just a learning experience and a learning opportunity.
Excellent. Now, what about budgeting and things like that? People might think about the logistics, such as, how much money should you bring? What really should you have on you to be safe? Because, you might worry about somebody, robbing you, things like that. I mean, all these things that people think about when it comes to planning for a trip like this.
Yeah, Daniel, those are all really good questions. First off, I'd like to state I'm cheap. I retired at a very young age, and I did not retire with stacks of gold. I retired with some common sense, budgeting, and I've always. I'm not. I guess cheap's not the right term. I'm frugal. So when I take a big trip like this, one of the first things I look at, what's the most economical way to do this? And I've found, especially in foreign travel, these hostels are incredible. On the Camino, my lodging was anywhere between 5 to 14 euros per night, and so that's about, let's say, 8 to maybe $20. And in throughout Europe, the hostel systems, they're just incredible. Mm-hmm. You can get a bed and a shower for usually somewhere between really 15 and $30. So the first thing I look at is that. If you want to go upscale and start staying in hotels, you're going to drain the bathtub before you even put a toe in it. European normal hotels, very, very expensive. You can easily spend $200 or $300 a night for a pretty marginal place. So I look at A, lodging, and then B, when I go to these places, I certainly don't accumulate things. I wouldn't go to Europe on my bicycle to come home with a bunch of clothes or something.
Right.
So the only stuff you really do have to worry about is food and lodging. And again, I try to be very economical with that.
Now, was there any part of this journey that reached beyond your expectations?
Oh, Daniel, I would say I've never been on one that hasn't blown my expectations away. But the best thing to do when you take a trip like this is just to leave all your expectations behind. Anytime you embark on something like this with a prefab set of ideals, you're always going to be let down. If you go expecting nothing, how do the bar's so low that how can things not work out? And even, if you take a big trip and the first thing that happens is, your airplanes are delayed, that kind of stuff used to make me pretty uptight. Now I just take it as a message that it's meant to be, and I learn to maybe make a new friend at the airport, maybe try a new restaurant, maybe get a little exercise by walking around. But if you get involved in any kind of extensive travel and you let the small little things wind you up and get you all upset, you're not ready to take that kind of travel. You just really have to go with the flow and take the punches as they come and realize you can't do anything about them.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was it like for you as you were out there? Perhaps you found yourself broke down mechanically. Did you find that these countries and these people approached were very friendly and very helpful for you?
Not necessarily. When I was on that bike trip, I had a chronic problem that I didn't solve till pretty far into the trip. And what happened is my rear wheel spokes always broke.
Oh, wow.
And I think it happened to me about 5 times. And I don't know if you're a bicycler or not, but when your back tire spoke breaks, you're out of commission. The wheel wobbles, and you just have to get off no matter where you're at. I had it replaced over and over and worked on, and everybody assured me they were the greatest people in the world and it would never happen again, and, it would inevitably happen. I found the first 3 or 4 times, I walked into this one shop this one time, and I said, look, I'm just desperate. I can't wait around all day. I'll pay whatever is needed to be done to have this repaired, and I'm kind of at your mercy. And the guy said, we'll take care of you. And later on, when they gave me my bike back, they charged $150. And my fault, I offered, said, do what you need to do. And here in the States, that would be maybe a $10 or $15 repair. I mean, it's just not that big of a deal. So I felt I was taking advantage of it a few times. The final place where they fixed this spoke, I went in the shop. It was in Italy, and this guy didn't speak the language at all. I pointed on a map to all the places that I had ridden and pointed to the spoke and kind of told him all the trouble I had as best I could. This guy took so much time fixing that wheel, and when everything was done, I got ready to pay him, and he just shook his head and said no money. And I never had a problem with that wheel until that time. I never had a problem with the wheel after that time. So ironically, the people that kind of took advantage of me didn't do the greatest work, and at the end of the rainbow, the guy who did the best work wouldn't take a dime from me. Mm-hmm. So really a nice ending there.
Certainly so. When you're out there, too, on something like this, and you're out there solo, I guess one of the advantages of being on your own is You don't have to listen to somebody else snivel and whine and complain and really drag you down through the day, especially over the little things that you may be experiencing. What were some other advantages about being on your own?
You know, Daniel, solo travel is something I really advocate that everybody goes out and at least tries. And whether it's a weekend trip to the beach or maybe even just start off by going to a movie by yourself. But when you go out and you do these things on your own, first off, you're much more approachable. If you go out as a group, well, other people aren't really going to feel that comfortable, approaching 2 or 3 people as they are one. So you're going to make a lot more friends when you're by yourself. The other thing, I believe, we all compromise so much in life. We compromise with our lovers, with our family, with our employers, with society, whatever it may be. You go on one of these trips by yourself, you are the king, the sole decision maker, and responsible for everything. It's nobody else's fault because you went too far one day or didn't go far enough, and the holes you dig you have to, get yourself out of. So I would really, really be a proponent of encouraging people to go out and try these things on your own.
Now you find yourself solo, but what happens, or did you have maybe this in the back of your mind, and perhaps thankfully it didn't happen, but having, an accident to where you might be slightly debilitated, what you would do about that on one of them lonely European country roads?
Daniel, it doesn't really come up to my radar screen. I mean, okay. You can get hurt on a road in front of your house. You can get hurt anywhere. And I guess I just have a little bit of faith in humanity that good, kind people will always come out to help. And it would sure suck. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than being, stuck in a foreign country in a really rotten situation. But for the most part, you just would be surprised at how good people really are and how folks will come out to help you.
Wow, outstanding. And it's just such an amazing journey that you took there. Did you ever find yourself caught in any storms of anything?
Yes. On this European bike trip, I ended up with, for some reason, it didn't matter which direction I went in the morning. All I had to do is look up there's a lot of castles over there, so they all have these flags. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, the flag was always pointing at me, which meant wind was in my face for a relentless number of days. And I also experienced some pretty bad rainstorms. And I remember one time I was on some weird trail in the middle of I don't even know where, and I had to go inside of one of those it looked like one of the London red telephone booths. And there was no phone in there. It was just literally shelter. And I remember sitting in this booth for about 45 minutes under this outrageous thunderstorm in the middle of nowhere. And, of course, as it was meant to be, I don't think I saw another one of these telephone structures for 100 miles, but when I needed it, it was right there.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Were there any awestruck moments for you, and what were those like?
Oh, gosh, I've always had an awestruck moment. I think that every day something big would happen on all of these trips. It may be something as simple as a sunrise. I remember one time on the European trip I got a flat tire and I didn't know how to change it. There's a man who I'd never met before who pulled over and helped me out. And it was kind of ironic as he's changing my tire, he made a comment that he was one time in the San Francisco area and he ran into a deer and a stranger helped him out. So he felt this was getting even for the help he received at that point in time. And that charmed me. On the Camino Trail, boy, there's something magic about that where whenever you are in need, whatever you seem to need at the time, it just appears. And I would say that's the kind of trail that as you're walking along, if you were to roll your ankle and really be injured, 3 or 4 people behind you would be an orthopedic surgeon from the Mayo Clinic. If you needed a bandage, the bandage supply people would come along. If you needed water, it would just seem to appear. And those I used to think that those were synchronous, or there was kind of synchronicity involved in those. I don't anymore. I just think that things are meant to be, and there's always people there to help.
As I was talking with Bruce Feiler, who's well known for writing the book Walking the Bible, I remember we got to a point where we were talking about, because Walking the Bible is about walking the 5 books of Moses, and he was talking about at one point where he was out in the desert and it was just extremely dark, where you could pluck the stars from the skies. They seemed so close. And you start to imagine what it was like as Moses was leading the Israelites, out of Egypt, to be on their own, follow me, this is what God says. And there you are out in the desert. And I said, you would have to have tremendous faith to believe that you would be taken care of, especially when you're going out into the unknown. And a lot of times, many people sit sedate. They don't want to take what they perceive to be a risk, because they're afraid of the unknown. And when you describe what happened with you on the Camino Trail, and you're here out in Europe and you're bicycling, through 9 European countries, there's a sense that you have to pretty much have faith to surrender, just to really enjoy the journey, and that what you need will be provided. So it sounds like you really discover that that's true.
Yeah, surrender is a beautiful word, and you nailed it, and really, you just nailed it. It's exactly what you need to do. If you go on something like this and you're full of fear and you're just worried all the time and you're worried about what's around every corner, it's kind of like your life. You can't live life like that. No. And if you do, you're going to end up in a nut house or have very limited happiness. If you can learn to let go and realize and just accept that some bad things may happen, but some really good things may happen too. And the first part of your question there I really liked, in that you talked about having fear of going on something like this. Daniel, maybe I'm blessed or whatever. I feel extremely fortunate that I have more fear about not taking a trip like this than I do of taking a trip like this. Because if I'm not going out and pushing the boundaries, that means I'm living in a cocoon of comfort. And for me, being in that zone, I start to sleepwalk, and I start to go through the motions of life without living life. When I step outside and I push it, that to me is where it almost wakes me up or seems to teach me a lesson that I need to be taught. And I'm not like an adrenaline freak. I don't equate these trips to, hang gliding or rope jumping off of a bridge or something like that. I don't need that kind of a charge to wake me up. But I just think we're so subject to routines. And like water flowing down a river, our thoughts begin to take the path of least resistance, and we almost become frozen into these pre-programmed ways of doing everything. And I don't ever want that to happen to me. I always want to change and grow, and I find travel is a great way to do that.
Kurt, it's interesting that you said that, because just recently I was talking with a friend of mine, and she's, a spiritual counselor, if you will, and she says, it's really interesting that you get these people that go out and they try to, do everything you can possibly do in life, and they do it for the sake of saying that they did it. And you don't get that impression with your story. You get this impression from you that this seems like a curious adventure. I just wonder what this will be, and then you go and you do it. Versus the guy that says, yeah, I've skydived, I've done the big wave surfing, I've climbed El Capitan, and they rattle off this long resume of things that they've done, but yet, that to me seems to be, as she was pointing out, there's a very shallow spiritual fulfillment to all of this, which yours goes much, much deeper, which it probably truly was a spiritual fulfillment for you.
Yeah, these have all been very spiritually inclined, and if I was to make a list of the big trips I've done, the only marquee one that anyone would even know is the Camino. The other ones I've done have all been extremely off the beaten path. And ironically, the European bike trip I did, that was several thousand miles, and I went through 9 countries, and it was a pretty lengthy deal. I also did 2,000 miles on a train, so it was really a 4,000-mile journey. I've told people about that trip, and they go, well, that sounds pretty neat. Then I tell them that I went down the west coast of the United States from Seattle to San Diego. And people can picture that, and they can understand it, and they're like, wow, you did that?
Right.
Well, the European one, distance-wise, much further. But it's just, at least that's something that people can kind of understand. And being on any of these things, it is a spiritual trip for me. It just really reinforces the power of being in the moment, and there's a lesson to be learned around every corner, and you'll just, the kindness and goodness of strangers helping you out, your opportunity to intersect with people. To me, it's all very, very spiritual. And I never know when the next journey is going to happen. I don't have like a bucket list of 30 places to see before I die.
Right.
But when a journey presents itself to me, it seems to come into my life at the right time, and I jump all over it, and I take full advantage of it. And I know where my next journey is. The one after that, I have no idea, but I guarantee you, unless I get struck by lightning or an early exit from this planet, I'm going to take a lot more journeys in my life.
I think, Kurt, that's such a wonderful way to go about this dynamic wanderlust that you have that comes into you. You decide through an inner guidance, a voice that says, this is your next journey, and it opens up. And, the thing I think that's really exciting about the possibility for our listeners out there who decide perhaps they want to do something like this is to follow that inner voice like you have. And it's because you follow that you can trust that things will work out. Maybe at times not the way you wanted them to or expected them to, but they will work out. And in the end, what you were left with is one heck of a long Christmas where you open that present not knowing what you're going to get, anticipating what's going to happen, and the fulfillment of a surprise that you never anticipated. And I can see how journeys like this are very fulfilling for someone.
Oh, that's exactly it again. You're getting a pretty good history on nailing these in advance here.
That's what we get for having repeat guests.
My next trip that's coming up, which actually is I'm going to leave Boise, Idaho on September 28th. Mm-hmm. This is kind of a fun story. I do a lot of speaking about the Camino from my book. And a very common question is, what is your next journey? And my answer for a long time has been, I'm not sure, but when it's right, I'll know it. Mm-hmm. So about 2 months ago, I was at a local woman's house who she had invited me to come and talk to her book club. And I didn't know this person. I went to her home. I met her, for about an hour before the guests arrived, and we had a really nice night. I did a presentation, met probably 20 of her friends, and really had a good time. At the end of the night, she came up to me and said, Kurt, this may sound a little weird, but I'm taking a trip with some women that you know, and at the end of the trip, there's a walk, and you may want to come and join me on this walk. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know this lady, I'm kind of odd, I'm in their house, and it just all seemed weird. So as politely as I could say no, I said, why don't you send me an email and I'll take a look at it. Well, I was traveling the next week, so it took me a little time to open it up, but I opened up this email, and I started reading about this adventure she was going to take. I looked at it for about 75 seconds and said, I have to go there. And the country is called Bhutan. It is south of China, north of India, and east of Nepal. It's a Buddhist country with about 700,000 people, and they measure their success in the world through gross national happiness, as opposed to GDP, which most other countries do for chest-thumping reasons. And just reading about that, and the hike it's a 19-day excursion through the Himalayan mountains. I just started reading this stuff and said, I'm in. and this journey truly found me, and I just can't wait to go.
Well, it's exciting to hear someone who's actually out there living life by just kind of letting the wind blow. There is some planning. You certainly want some of that done, but you're pretty much letting go, and it really takes you into opportunities you just never could have imagined.
Yeah, this upcoming trip is exactly that. I'm experienced with leaving expectations behind.
Right.
So I don't have any idea what's going to happen here, and there's a whole lot of things that could happen. We're going to be at some altitude, and I've never hiked at altitude, so my whole trip may be altitude sickness. As a very fortunate person, this is pretty lucky. I am a single man, and I got the itinerary of the other people. This is a guided trip I'm going on. There's one other man from Canada who's going on this trip, and there are 7 women, and they are from Hong Kong, Sweden. There's a woman from Norway, another one from Germany, and I'm just liking the karma of the crowd already.
Well, I want you to make a promise to me in front of our listeners right here. When you go to Bhutan and you happen to come across a Yeti, that you send me a picture of you posing with one of these things, and that I get it to be one of the first ones to do that so we can post it on our website.
I like that. I do promise I'll do that. And I'll tell you what's going to be interesting, though. After I get that elusive photo, I'm going to be so far out in the middle of nowhere that I will have no communication for the 20 days that I'm out on the trail. But on the 21st day, when I have the photo with the Yeti, Daniel, you are the first person that I promise will see this photo.
Outstanding. Kurt, it's been a real pleasure to have you back on the program. Perhaps we'll bring you back after the Bhutan trip so people can get a feel and an idea what that experience was like. We want people to pick up their wanderlust because, you know, in a day and an age where we're beginning to see more and more of a break in the ideal of retirement, you know, what do we do besides sitting around and playing golf all day? Well, pick up your wanderlust and see where it takes you. You just never know what opportunities lie ahead or around that next corner. And, of course, someone like you coming on the program encourages them to feel the inspiration to do that very thing. So thank you for being on the program.
Well, thank you for having me, and it would be an honor to come back again. So thank you.
Give out a website real quick where people, if they want to find out more about your Camino trip, they can find out about that as well.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. It's KurtKoontz.com, and that's KurtKoontz.com. And my book about the Camino is called A Million Steps, and that's available through Amazon. It's probably the best place to get it. So I'd appreciate any support I can have. And I'm also available for speaking engagements, so you can get me through the website, and I'll come and talk to your groups.
That's at KurtKoontz.com. Very good. Kurt, thank you again for joining us here on the program.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. We're inspiring you with your wanderlust, so we're going to bring guests that tell you about some ideas that you just may want to engage in. One of the things you can do as well is you can embark on a journey to Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. We'll have some posts up there where you can find out more as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.